The Dragon's Return, Chapter 10, The Wicked Day. Arthur had never really enjoyed celebrating his birthday. It felt like a betrayal to his mother, who had died the day he was born. But the council had insisted it would be a good idea. Even Merlin had agreed with them. Arthur's birthday fell on the first day of spring, and a celebration had been planned. The only thing Arthur was really looking forward to was that Merlin, since she was now a counselor, could attend the feast rather than serve at it, though she did not end up sitting at the high table with him, instead sitting next to Gaius. If his father hadn't been present, Arthur would have moved her to sit next to him. But with Uther present, things became complicated. He would admit that he was somewhat glad to see the father he'd thought he knew that day. It made the last few hours of the day hurt more. He wasn't sure later if the wooziness was from the wine or from something else, but the assassin had been unexpected. He had nearly succeeded in killing Arthur. If his father hadn't snapped into action despite a year of languishing in his own misery, Arthur would be dead. But then the assassin had pulled a knife, and just as his father sank the killing blow, the assassin struck upward, the knife sinking into Uther's chest. The blow had not been immediately fatal, and perhaps that was worse. Watching his father fade from this world was hard. Merlin had admitted that she was rubbish at healing magic, but had set out to find a friend who could help. Gaius pulled Arthur aside the night after Merlin left. "I've received word from Merlin. She is sending help for your father. 2 druids she has met before have agreed to help, but she will not return until after they are safely out of Camelot," the physician explained. Arthur frowned, but nodded. He did not enjoy the idea of Merlin being hostage to his compliance, despite all assurances Gaius gave that the druids were peaceful. "You must get them into the castle. Merlin has said that they will meet you at the grate where you helped the druid boy escape tonight after sunset," Gaius said, his eyebrow the only thing that betrayed his feelings about that statement. Arthur was not sure what he'd been expecting, but a pair of familiar faces was not it. The first was something of a relief. Isildur had offered him assistance years ago when he'd helped to rescue the young druid boy. Arthur had never thought to call in that favor. Clearly, Merlin had. The other figure was a bigger surprise. The druid girl was pretty up close, her odd white hair covered by the hood of her brown robes. She still wore the black veil, but her eyes were not gold anymore. Arthur frowned as he stepped forward.
"Thank you for coming. I know the risks you take in doing so, but I cannot in good conscience allow one to enter Camelot without knowing you mean no harm,"
he said, his words directed at the druid girl.
"Please, I need to make sure you aren't actually Morgana in disguise. I know it may sound odd."
He began, gesturing to the veil the girl wore. Isildur opened his mouth to protest, but the girl shook her head. "No, he has every right to be cautious, Isildur." Her voice was quieter than he remembered, but she had something of an accent he could not place. "As you say, Emrys," Isildur said, nodding. The girl, Emrys, reached up and removed her veil. She was pretty, a spray of freckles covering the bridge of her nose and a pair of slightly thin lips. Her eyes, though, there was something familiar about them.
"Have we met? Your eyes seem very familiar,"
Arthur said. "We don't have time. Merlin informed us your father's condition is dire," Isildur said, and Arthur nodded. It was easy for him to get them into the castle and up to the king's chambers. Isildur advanced on the bed while Emrys hung back. Arthur frowned.
"Are you not here to help?"
he asked. "I'm here to make sure Isildur makes it out of here alive," the girl said shortly, not meeting Arthur's eyes. "Emrys is rather protective. I told her she did not need to be here, but she insisted," Isildur said. Emrys wrinkled her nose. "To be fair, it's not you I don't trust," she said in Arthur's direction. "You never went looking for me, or the other camp after the two griffins."
"There was no reason to. You'd done no harm, nor had they." They weren't your camp?
Arthur said, frowning, even as his eyes remained trained on his father, who looked to be sleeping. She shook her head, stepping up beside Isildur with a frown. No, do you hear that? She asked. Arthur fell silent, and Isildur paused what he was doing.
What does it sound like?
The elder druid asked. It's almost like a hissing, she said, rubbing her ears. Isildur handed the bottle he'd been holding to Emrys and closed his eyes, holding out a hand. He spoke, and his eyes glowed. A faint glow flickered to life around Uther's neck, and Isildur flinched. He pulled a handkerchief out of one of the pouches of his belt and reached under Uther's shirt. Arthur opened his mouth to protest, when Isildur pulled out a necklace Arthur had never seen before.
What is that?
Arthur asked. A cursed amulet, Isildur answered. Emrys's eyes widened. Cursed how? She demanded. Isildur pulled back Uther's shirt to show where the symbol on the necklace had burned itself into his skin. It is bound to the left path. Any healing becomes harm. There is nothing that can be done. He has worn the amulet for too long. The curse has taken hold of his body. I am sorry, Prince Arthur. There is nothing we can do. Isildur said, shaking his head. Arthur's face fell.
How? Who?
He asked, his voice breaking. Only a priestess of the triple goddess would be trained to do this, Isildur said. Morgana. Emrys hissed as though the name was a curse itself. Arthur shook his head. He nodded for the two druids to leave the room, but stopped in the hall.
How could she have done this? My father is under constant guard.
It would have been difficult to do without help. You've a traitor in your midst, Arthur Pendragon, Emrys said, the pronouncement hanging in the air. Galahad had been on night rounds when he heard Arthur's voice in the hall ahead of him.
My father is under constant guard,
he said, and Galahad peeked around the corner. Arthur's back was to him. There were two other people in the hall. Both of them were wearing druid's robes. From the angle he had around the corner, he could see an older man and a young woman with white hair. They were standing next to a mirror in the hall, but the girl was angled so he could not see her face in it. It would be difficult without help. You've a traitor in your midst, Arthur Pendragon, the woman said, and Arthur's face pinched.
Thank you for trying to save my father. I know you had no real reason to do so, but thank you,
Arthur said, nodding.
Let me escort you out,
he said, and moved off down the hall. As the druids began to follow, the girl glanced over her shoulder, and Galahad caught a glimpse of her face in the mirror on the wall. Except it wasn't her face. She'd been tanned and freckled with white hair. The face in the mirror was Merlin's. Galahad remained frozen there for a moment as the figures vanished from sight. The next morning, Merlin returned. She'd left the day before to attempt to find something to help Uther. She'd been unsuccessful. Uther passed 2 days later in his sleep with Arthur at his side. Arthur stood vigil for his father by himself, as was tradition, but Galahad knew for a fact that Merlin waited outside the throne room the whole night. It took 2 days to plan Arthur's coronation. The majority of it had already been planned. It was more a matter of getting everyone who needed to be in Camelot for it word that their presence was requested. The coronation was lovely, but Galahad was having some problems enjoying it. He kept catching sight of Merlin. It was hard not to. With Arthur now being crowned king, he'd given Merlin another gift, a gown in rich royal blue. It was stunning. She looked amazing. But he couldn't get the image of her in druid's robes slipping out of sight into the dark hallway out of his mind. Why would she have been in disguise? Arthur couldn't know. She wouldn't have been disguised if he did, unless there was another reason. You've a traitor in your midst, Arthur Pendragon. That's what she had said. It had to be someone close to them, especially if Merlin was disguising herself. He frowned into his cup as the feast continued. Gawain clapped him on the shoulder. "You look upset, Galahad," he said, sitting down next to him. Galahad shook his head. "No, just thinking. Everything's going to change now, isn't it?" He pointed out. "Might not be a bad thing." "Keep an open mind," Gawain said. Galahad sighed and nodded. He wasn't going to turn Merlin in. She'd done too much for all of them for him to do that. He would be keeping a closer eye on her as much as he could from now on, though.